Okay. So I realised in my last video that the description I gave, and I knew this before I talked about it, is it's going to be at best vague and sounds like it doesn't make sense. Maybe I'm not very good at describing it, but I found that about myself about listening to people talk about non-duality from this perspective. It kind of doesn't make any sense. Like I said, it has to be experienced. So another one to try then. Experiencing the visual field is, for example, like I said in the previous video, if all is one, then this sphere of awareness that I call my senses, this cluster of sensations that makes up the self, I share with the entire universe. And if that's the case, then this cluster of experiences, this sphere of awareness that I call myself, then is the entire universe. So what I am experiencing right now is the entire universe. Anything beyond this is a thought form, a construction of the mind. So that's immediately apparent when I observe my surroundings here. How far am I aware of? What's the furthest that I can see? Where does this form end? So when this form ends, then essentially my experience of the universe ends as well. Anything beyond that is a construction of the mind based on memory or foresight, an image in the head. So for example, when I finish this video, I'm gonna drive my car somewhere else. I'm going somewhere. In reality, I'm not really going anywhere. If anything, the somewhere else is coming to me. The sphere of awareness, the form that surrounds me will change. My environment will change, because I'm always right here. I'm always here. I'm never going anywhere. Not really. Not from the point of view of direct experience. So for example, so I can see a junction ahead, and a left and a right, and beyond that I can't see anything. My direct experience isn't allowing me the image of what's further up the road there. How do I know? Because I know this area. What's further up the road? I know because of memory. So does that exist in my direct experience? Yes, it does exist as a memory, but without thought, without mental images, without images in the head and thought forms. As far as I'm aware, it doesn't exist at all, not yet. My direct experience says it doesn't exist. So all I know of the universe is what I can perceive through my senses right now. An ever-changing landscape of form that moves around this sphere of awareness, or within this sphere of awareness. Just like I explained in the previous video with the foresight, the prediction of talking about the footsteps surrounding the direct experience on either side, I've got the memory of where I came from and the projection based on memory on where I'm going. That's just thought. My direct experience is just this. So that's what I mean when looking out for what is direct experience and what is thought forms layered on top of that direct experience. And being able to observe the difference between the two, and how that takes careful attention sometimes, or all the time. And even in this sphere of awareness, where I can observe right now, I maybe jumped ahead a little bit in the last video to go into inquiring into your direct experience in the visual field. Even with that, so like I talked about the framings, we've got the breakdown of the visual field, the sounds, the compartmentalized senses that we segment into different categories. And again, that's just a construction, a thought construction. Direct experience doesn't differentiate between these sounds, these sensory experiences, these images, and these senses in the body. It's all the one sense. It's all the one, let's say, experience. And if you go into that with enough attention and look at what is actually here, look for the thoughts that are laid over the top, look for the interpretations that are seemingly inherent, the ideas, the thought forms, the mental images, and so on. When we become aware of them, then they can be seen through, they can dissolve, they can be let go of, and all that's left is just what is. Without labels, without interpretations, without predictions or overlays, without overlays of memory over the top. That are there to give us a sense of continuity and security and comfort. So an example of that is, so I'm going to go down to the end of this road, and then there's a bend that goes like this, and I can't see that. I can see it as it comes, but it's quite a sharp one. And see, I'm going fast, and the only reason I turn the steering wheel, the only reason I change my behaviour is because I know that road, and I can go fast enough down that road that allows me, the memory of that allows me to turn the steering wheel. Let's say, right. That prediction, that mind overlay, that construction, that filter, that lens based in memory that allows me to predict what the road ahead is without it being in my direct experience yet, allows me to drive safely. So it's a good thing that that's there. So what I'm not saying is that these overlays can't still function. It's just being aware of what is direct experience and what is an overlay of the mind, what is a construction that doesn't actually exist in your direct experience, and being able to differentiate between the two. And when you really go into the direct experience, then you start to notice things. You start to notice, sorry, 2 seconds here. yeah, you start to notice things that you didn't notice before. You start to notice details, and you start to notice that the overlays, the lenses, the filters that are there, that are seemingly inherent, that allow us to navigate in this reality. And for a period of time when it's appropriate, you don't need these, and you can notice them and just let them dissolve. And what I was trying to explain in the previous video is that, let me give this another bash, right? And there's no way I'm going to be able to explain this because it does not make sense from this perspective, right? But so I look at, say, a static landscape, right? I look at the landscape, and this is what freaked me out when I first noticed this. I look at the landscape, and there's this idea that there's my sight is going out and coming back or something like that, and I'm perceiving what's out there, right? So this is my sphere of awareness here, which I share with the entire universe, meaning this is the entire universe that I'm experiencing right now. So this person here is experiencing out here, and out here is the entire universe, but that's a separation. When I look at something, it is aware of itself through me, and that means that me doesn't exist. There's just the awareness, there's just the image, and not even an image, just the awareness in the form of whatever this is, shapes and colours and so on. So the idea of separation, the idea of distance between me and this other thing actually doesn't exist. This is what's impossible to explain, right? Try it for yourself. So you look at something, say I'm looking at a lamppost and a tree, and they're appearing together, aware of themselves, right there. And then when I start to look at that for long enough, and I look through the lenses, look through the construct of distance, then I notice that they're appearing together, aware of themselves together. They are the one thing, they are the one awareness that's aware of itself, and there actually isn't any distance there at all. Like, how do I know there's distance in this moment looking at this? In this moment, or looking at this, how do I know there's any distance? How do I know there's a me looking at this thing? I don't. It's not. It's a interpretation. It's an overlay. It's a construct that is seemingly inherent. But when I really look in my direct experience, what is there? What is there? Not mind me thinking I'm directly aware of this, and this is the one thing. These are the one. Not just look. What is there? What is there? And then I move, and the one in front moves slower than the one behind. And then you do it with movement as well. It seems ridiculous, doesn't it? You do it with movement as well, and you realise that there isn't actually any distance between anything. There only is relatively. It's a construction. This reality is a construction. The idea of separation and distance doesn't actually exist, apart from on the relative level for the separate self to function in this time space. Does that make sense? No, it doesn't make sense. But try it for yourself, and you. This is when, like, you start to experience simultaneously with this form and this distance, a formless, distanceless, timeless dimension that is simultaneously this as well. It's not a separate dimension. It's here, and that's when these ideas that this is when the paradox kicks in. The paradox is the most frightening thing, because when you start to see through the illusion, when you start to see that there's a different dimension to reality that inherently exists simultaneously, then it totally shatters. It takes away all these constructions that allow us to be comfortable in this seeming environment here. And it is jarring. It's really jarring. It can be for the self, but when there's no self there, there's no self to be jarred. anything that's of the mind, anything at all, any thought that comes up, because the thoughts will come up when these insights start to appear. The thoughts will come up, and that's just the self trying to grip onto reality as it knows it, and that's fine. It doesn't need to grip. It exists inherently as it is. Fine. It doesn't need to do that. It doesn't need to do that. Just let it go. The thoughts, let them go. Let them go. Don't try and figure it out. Don't pick up the mind. Don't try and grasp it, making sense of things. It doesn't need to make sense. It doesn't make sense anyway. So, but yeah, that's what I mean by direct experience. This is self-inquiry, inquiring into, is there a... So, is there this is me and that other thing, is there something else? Or is there something else? Is that me? Is everything I can be aware of, is everything in awareness here right now, is that me? Kind of has to be, doesn't it? This is me. This is all me, if we're going to put it in those terms. The sky is you, the trees are you, the sound of the birds is you, these physical sensations are you. Anything that we can be aware of as an object in consciousness is you. It's all you. And this is what is meant by being one with everything. But even the being one with everything is a form of duality, it's a thought form. It has to be direct experience. Don't try and figure out what is it that separates me from. Don't try and figure it out. Just look, just listen, just be here, just this, just aware. Without interpretation, without labels, without the need to understand, the need to know, the need to figure out. What helps as well is I always talk about expanding out, so be aware of your peripherals, be aware of the sound, be aware of the sensations, make them all to one sense. Single awareness, instantaneously and immediately aware of itself, in this moment always. We can see how if we don't inquire with deliberate effort, that the seemingly inherent constructs will just remain as they are if you don't kind of make an effort to see through. By the way, someone mentioned to me to mention, someone I talked to online, to mention about the effort in this, and yeah, it is an effort. So it's an effort that you have to force these old constructs out of the road. So the repetitive patterns of the mind is a habitual pattern that's reinforced over time. It has some strength to it, and it takes constant, repetitive reminding and practice. Initially, I said relentlessly, and I still agree with that. Relentlessly remember, bring your awareness back to the present moment. Remember, you have to force that old habit out of the road. It does initially it takes effort. It does take effort, but it takes the amount of effort necessary to rewire that habit, to change that habit into something that's more favourable towards this practice that we're doing now. But yes, it does relentlessly. You have to, because if you just let the old patterns go, like I said, they're automatic. You have to keep being aware of them, keep moving back, keep expanding out, keep refining your intention constantly. And it has to almost become like a decision. And it helped for me to make an objective decision, and thought that this is what I'm going to do, and from this point forward, make a conscious decision that this is how I'm going to live. This is important to me, and I'm going to force these old habits out the road and replace them with new ones, just like that. So that drive, that will, is required from the person in order to surrender. I think at the start, for me it was anyway, to have that will to pursue this with as much intensity as possible. And eventually, like talking about entering the stream, it flips, and the shift comes about, and the scales tip, and it starts to become, the effort isn't really there anymore, and there was a whole transitional period for me, where your relationship with the effort, we notice, is constructed by the effort is constructed by the person. It doesn't need to be there, but you need to use those constructs of the person as a tool initially, paradoxically, to force that effort out of the road. Again, that makes no sense, but like I said, practice for yourself. I need to go now, so I'll talk to you next time.